Okay, let's go in that direction because you and I have talked about that frequently. I think we have a war going on in Ukraine, which is one of the breadbaskets, certainly of Europe, important for North Africa and Asia. We have an ongoing extraordinary heat event in India and Pakistan, which I'd like your take on. But that has caused India to shut down their grain exports for now. Well, of course, we've got this drought going on in the United States too. And so two major drought situations in important agricultural areas, plus a war. What does that suggest to you?
We also had a bad drought in Argentina early this year that cut down on some of their food production and exports. So yeah, there's a lot of drought action going on, causing trouble with world food supplies right now. And I'm concerned for the coming summer for the other major breadbaskets of the world, i.e. the US, parts of Eastern Europe, China, what might happen there. We need to have some good harvests and some good weather this year to keep the food crisis from getting even worse than it is. And it's of great concern that drought is so prevalent right now over some of the grain growing areas of the US, particularly along Kansas, Nebraska, and that region. So we'll just have to cross our fingers for some wetter weather. We got to break this drought to help boost the world food supplies.
We had a paper that examined the likelihood of an event that such as we're seeing in India right now, and basically found that that likelihood was increased manyfold by climate change.
India and Pakistan since March have been seeing a heat wave that is extremely long and record-breaking in some respects. And that type of a heat wave is made more frequent by about a factor of 30 due to climate change, said a recent report by the World Weather Attribution Group. And that's a problem for not only global food supplies this year, but also, of course, for the people living there, since about only 8% of people living in India have access to air conditioning. They're getting very near the theoretical limit of human survivability for a hot and humid climate on some of these days. And if you don't have air conditioning, you're going to be not able to survive if you're out there in this sort of heat. And this year, 2022, we have to think is going to be one of the coolest years for the rest of the coming century. And there has to be a lot of adaptation occurring to make these heat waves survivable in the future in places like India and Pakistan.
So talk about that a little bit. There's something called wet bulb temperature, which frankly, I keep trying to understand and I don't really understand. Maybe you can explain that and what it means for human physiology?
Yeah, it's not just the heat, it's the humidity. I mean, that's the classic expression. And if you get enough humidity, say if it's 95 degrees Fahrenheit and you have 100% humidity, that is kind of the limit of human survivability. At that point, your body can't cool itself and your core temperature starts going up and you eventually get heat stroke. So that's what we mean by a wet bulb temperature of 95 degrees, of being the limit of human survivability, essentially 100% humidity. So if it's hotter, if it's say 120 degrees, you don't need to have 100% humidity to have a wet bulb temperature of 95. I don't know the exact number, but essentially have the equivalent of 95 degrees with 100% humidity if you've got a wet bulb temperature 95. Now, you don't even need to have a wet bulb temperature of 95 to be not survivable. Even among healthy volunteers in a laboratory where they put them on a treadmill and exposed them to different combinations of heat and humidity, they found that a wet bulb temperature much lower than that, say in the mid 80s, was not survivable if you did ordinary tasks for an extended period. So yeah, wet bulb temperature is something that we'll be seeing a lot more of in the future, and we need to be paying attention to it.